Hello, good morning. Welcome to Morning Coffee with Dr. Childress. I'm taking a break from work right now, so I might not be with you very long. I'm just going to check in and say, "Hi, how you doing?" Um, and then get back to my work. I'm Sunday on a Memorial Day weekend, and Dr. Childress is working. Kind of gives you an indication of my life. I can't tell you anything about my cases, which is unfortunate to a degree, but that's how we work, with just sort of confidentiality. But generally, what I'm doing right now is after I talk with you, I'm going to go back to reading a custody evaluation. I've already done one in the matter, so they have one custody evaluation. And I've gone through that one line by line and created my notes for that. And now I'm doing a second one that's on the matter. They have two custody evaluations on the same matter. So I'm looking at the second one, doing the same thing, going through it line by line. And I'm applying the knowledge of clinical psychology to the information that the evaluators report. And they do a fairly detailed job of reporting on the symptom information. They just provide zero analysis of it. They don't apply any knowledge, they don't process it in any professional way. And so it's just a reporting of symptoms and what everybody's accusing the other person of. Now, as a clinical psychologist, that's a goldmine for me because diagnosis is based on a pattern match of symptoms to criteria. So if you're telling me exactly what the symptoms are, I can lay on the criteria. And there's DSM categorical diagnoses like child psychological abuse and delusional disorders and a factitious disorder imposed on another, spousal abuse, psychological abuse of the spouse. There's all those DSM types of diagnoses, but there's also a bunch of diagnoses called clinical diagnoses. And those are family systems, would be an example of that. So you apply the knowledge of family systems therapy to reach clinical diagnoses of a cross generational coalition, an emotional cutoff, child's being triangulated in, there's an inverted hierarchy. All those things are called clinical diagnoses. A dark personality would be a clinical diagnosis. If you wanted to make the DSM diagnosis of narcissistic and borderline, you could do that, but it's not necessary. What That's just an associated feature that goes into the mix, the personality disorder pathology. If it's we would expect to see symptom indicators of parental narcissism. If we see parental indicators of parental psychopathy or Machiavellian manipulation, we might be into the dark, or even sadism. And but we would expect to see either narcissistic or absence of empathy or borderline splitting kinds of symptom features surrounding the family, and that would support the diagnosis of the shared delusion, factitious disorder, child psychological abuse, spousal abuse. But it's not necessary to make that actual diagnosis of a personality disorder because personality spectrum will create the pathology. I don't need the diagnosis on that parent. So just reporting to me the child's symptoms will give me everything I need. Plus, I see all the personality pathology, see the delusional disorders, see the cross generational coalitions, and I extract all of that in my line by line analysis of the forensic report. Then the forensic psychologist, after they basically record their interviews and then put the transcript as their history and symptoms. So I basically get the same thing they do. I'm not sure what the difference is between their interview and their reporting on the transcript of the interview, but so I'm in a pretty advantageous position, getting such detailed information from the forensic people with zero analysis. So what my line by line does is kind of layers in the analysis to their reporting. So they report the symptoms, but no analysis. So Dr. Childress comes in and just layers in the analysis right in line by line of sentence by sentence of their custody evaluation. And then that's my notes. Then from my notes, I then write about a 20-page summary report. And that way, my summary report can be more precise and to the point, and not get lost in the trees and be able to see the forest that we're looking at. And if anybody has a question about why did I make my summary statement, they can go look at Appendix 1, and it's all laid out where that supporting evidence is. So that's my current practice. I'm a consultant in the family courts reviewing mental health professional reports. I'm kind of like like Professor Childress, um, grading papers of my students, my doctoral level students, uh, that they're problematic reports. And so I'm going through, doing my little red pen, marking them up, and giving them a final grade on their report based on the application of established scientific and professional knowledge. Now, interestingly, I think at least the previous forensic report I did on this one too, might be headed for using the word parental alienation. These the custody evaluations. The previous guy kind of worked it up that way. It kind of came all, and they did their testing, and they get to the final. What do you do about it? And the analysis they provided was about parental alienation. And you can imagine that didn't get a very warm reception from Dr. Childress. I basically said it doesn't exist, and that's a violation of Standard 2.04, bases for scientific and professional judgments, and that leaves them basically with zero analysis from the established knowledge, which would be a violation of Standard 2.04, which we would then look at their vita, see if they have a background in their, what is it, background education, training, and experience. I'll look first to their assessment of delusional thought disorders, because they'll have no experience in the diagnostic assessment of delusional thought disorders, because that's only in schizophrenia. And the schizophrenia people don't work over here, and the forensic people are just lazy, and so they don't acquire the information that they need. So that would be a violation of 2.01, boundaries of competence, if they're working with a potential delusional thought disorder. And I cite Walters and Friedlander, who cite me, but it's Walters and Friedlander, Journal of the AFCC, Family Court Review. They say it's potential delusional thought disorder by a parent imposed on the child. So the forensic evaluator should know that that's the pathology they're potentially working with, and they should have the background, education, training, and experience to be able to assess and diagnose it. And so I look at their vita. They don't. Violation of 2.01. And then 2.04, they didn't apply the knowledge. So I got two violations. Then those both, though any two is a competent standard, 2.01, 2.04, 2.03, anything two is a competent standard. And because they failed on two standards, they failed to know the knowledge, boundaries of competence, 2.01, and they failed to apply the knowledge as a basis for their judgments, 2.04. As a result, here's a sentence. Their opinions, as contained in their recommendations, reports, diagnostic or evaluative statements, including their forensic testimony, is not based on information and techniques sufficient to substantiate their findings. And so that's the final question that everything's going to land on, because that's why I'm brought into the case, to see if we can rely on the recommendations of the custody evaluator. So I go through them line by line and take them apart. Very expensive for you parents. Oh my goodness, my time going through somebody else's nonsense line by line, it's problematic. I don't bill to my hours. Let me put it that way. My hours are way more than what I would bill for my time. But I think it's important to get to alert the forensic psychologists that they're being held accountable and individually accountable. Any one of their forensic evaluations may show up being reviewed by Dr. Childress, and they don't know which one because it's all random selection by their clients. And so my job is just to apply the knowledge of clinical psychology to the information. And that's because I have two clients. Okay. I have, as a clinical psychologist, my client's always the child. When I come into the family, my client's the child. I may be hired by the parent or somebody else, teachers or whoever, but my client's the child as a clinical psychologist. So I always have that. The second, though, when I'm court involved, I have the judge as my client, I have the court. And so I have to do a really good job for the court because the court has a big decision regarding child custody here and any possible child abuse by one parent or the other. And the court is going to rely, hopefully, on my opinion, on my professional judgment. And I know courts don't like me, doctors using the word judgment because they think they're the only ones that do that. No, no, no. Doctors judge too. We make our professional judgments. And that's why 2.04 refers to the um, bases for scientific and professional judgments of doctors. And so the court is going to be relying on my judgment from doctor world. My judgment has to be accurate 100% of the time. Holy cow, I'm telling the court whether or not there's child abuse, and the court's going to rely on that. I got to be accurate in what I'm talking about. So I apply the established knowledge of professional psychology and just inform the court of what I see going on based on the material I review. I haven't interviewed anybody. I can't give a diagnosis. If I interview them, you're getting a diagnosis out of me. But I haven't interviewed anybody, so I'm just doing a record review. I'm not diagnosing anybody. I'm just applying knowledge because the forensic psychologist didn't. They give you the symptoms. I'm giving you the knowledge, Your Honor. And I'm not taking sides. I don't care who, what, wow, it doesn't matter. My service is to the court because there's an attorney in a particular matter who brings me on board, who believes that the application of knowledge from clinical psychology will be of benefit to the court in making its decisions regarding the family and child. So that attorney gets a hold of me, and what they want from me is just baseline application of clinical knowledge to the information I review. That's what they want. They don't want me taking sides. The court system has advocates. They're called attorneys. Doctors shouldn't be advocates in the court. Over in my world, doctor world, I can advocate all I want for treatments and stuff. But when I enter the court system has advocates. I'm evidence. So I apply the knowledge and do what I do, and then allow the attorneys to present the evidence to the court. And that's, I believe, my value to the attorney, to the parent, and to the court is that I'm not taking sides in anything and I'm pretty neutral. And I tell you ahead of time exactly what knowledge I'm going to apply. Delusional thought disorders. I'm looking for a persecutory delusion. Child psychological abuse, spousal abuse, using the child as a weapon. I'm looking at dark personalities, psychological control, Barber. Um, let's see what else. Family systems, cross generational coalition, emotional cutoff, inverted hierarchy. Uh, so I tell you right up front what the information I'm looking at because it's established knowledge. It's an attachment pathology, all the stuff on attachment, um, because that's what we should be relying on. And I know the knowledge, so I don't create knowledge, I just apply it. And that's my value to everybody involved. So that's what I'm doing on my Sundays is going through these evaluations. It used to be a little bit more irritating to me, reading the immense nonsense of these forensic people, and I tried to get through it, like, section by section or summary report, and it was just such dense stupidity and just ignorance that I couldn't do that. And so eventually, a couple of years ago, I just started going through line by line, sentence by sentence, because that's how dense the information they're reporting is, that there's just every sentence contains a wealth of information that they are just missing because they don't have the eyes to see it. And so clinical psychologist has the eyes to see it, and they're in trouble, in terms of competence. I don't know, but that's a second issue. We got to get the child and the family back on a proper course, and that's sort of my ultimate movement with the court, is that we have to restore the family. I'm all about treatment. I'm not custody. We have pathology in the family. We have a problem. Problem and pathology mean the same thing. We must first diagnose what the pathology is before we know how to treat it. We must first identify what the problem is before we know how to fix it. So, diagnosis means identify, pathology means problem, treatment means fix it. So, we got a problem, Your Honor. We got a problem in the family. We got a pathology in the family. We need to identify what it is. We need to diagnose it, what it is, so we can fix it. But it all lands on fixing it. We never leave severe attachment pathology untreated and unrepaired. We just need to, and we know if we got severe attachment pathology, we got child abuse by one parent or the other. Because that's the only thing that creates a child rejecting a parent is child abuse by one parent or the other. So it's either the targeted parent is abusing that child, creating the child's attachment pathology towards that parent. Well, that's a scary thing. Let's check it out. Or we have a narcissistic, borderline, dark personality parent who's creating a false attachment pathology in order to manipulate the court around child custody. So, the dark personality is a narcissist. That's a dangerous human. That's child abuse. So, we have child abuse on this side, and we have child abuse on the other side, one way or the other, because that's the only thing that's going to create that level of attachment pathology. So, holy cow, Your Honor, in all of your cases where the child's coming in saying, I don't want to be with a parent, we need to get a proper assessment and an accurate diagnosis on child abuse, because you have to make a decision based on whether there's child abuse and which parent. So you need to be getting a higher, much higher quality of professional services out of the psychologists. And I'm kind of your standard. That's why I keep saying I'm not the ceiling, I'm the floor. I'm the standard of what you should be getting, Your Honor. This is what the psychologists, all of them, should be giving you. They shouldn't have to call in Dr. Childress. They should get this on round one. They should get me. But they're not. So Professor Childress is in the classroom grading papers to get the quality of our professional services into the court up to at least the standard of the APA ethics code. At least using the knowledge from the 1960s and 70s and 80s. I'm not even asking them to use a knowledge from like 2000s or 2010s. That would be intersubjectivity and a bunch of other stuff, really cool stuff. But no, you don't have to use that, any of the neurological stuff, just family systems therapy, applied behavioral analysis, personality disorders, delusional thought disorders. Got to get those assessed. I would recommend, I'm going to be wrapping up here and getting back to work, but I would recommend if you're going to be doing these assessments um, about stuff, forensic assessments, that you do a brief psychiatric rating scale, a brief BPRS item 11 on the unusual thought content. Now, I would add the anger and fear and suspiciousness and anxiety and a few of the others, and just get a 7-point rating on them. But definitely the unusual thought content. And I get out this Joseph Ventura or somebody who knows how to train in the BPRS, Joseph Ventura at UCLA, and get trained up in the use of the BPRS. AFCC, hook up with Joe Ventura at UCLA, get trained in, get your forensic people trained in the diagnostic assessment of delusional thought disorders. Um, but they're ignorant, they're lazy, they don't care. The other thing, forensic custody evaluations are completely a waste of time. The New York Blue Ribbon Commission on Forensic Custody Evaluations, absolutely accurate, absolutely a waste of time, and significant problems associated with them. One of which is how to get incompetent ones overturned or evaluated. Me, that's what I do. I'm the second opinion review on them, and they are really really bad. The ones I'm that are come getting into me. But so it's I don't recommend that anybody do a forensic. I think they should just die out based on lack of demand, supply and demand. There's just no demand for them anymore. I think we need to move over to clinical diagnostic assessments. We can return those in 4 to 6 weeks. We got to get the standardized assessment protocol up so everybody stops fighting about it. I have one, but everybody's going to fight about the one I recommend. So let's get a standardized assessment. We need to stop fighting about it, and a standardized treatment protocol based on the diagnosis. But we need to get a clinical diagnostic assessment. This is child abuse moving one way or the other. We need to return an accurate diagnosis to the court 100% of the time, and we can do that. It's just a motivational thing. It's people aren't motivated to fix the problem in the family courts. As soon as there's motivation, all the solutions are absolutely available, but no one's motivated to solve it. The forensic people are getting lots of money. The gardenering people think they're experts, and the attorneys don't have any motivation. The judges are motivated, but the judges don't know where to turn. And so that's kind of, Your Honor, you need to be getting higher quality services. That's the problem. So hang on. We'll be looking to get you the appropriate professional services into the family courts. But if they were doing these custody evaluations, the Roberts apperception test for children, holy Toledo! If we ever get a research program up on these families, I want to include the Roberts apperception test for children for every single child. Holy cow, that will give us such wonderful information about these children, and not a single custody evaluation uses it. They do MMPIs and stupid parent rating scales and stupid stuff. Stupid. And they don't do the Roberts apperception test for children because they are lazy and ignorant like a rock, and it just kills me. But I don't see the need to do it because it's not diagnostic, and we don't need to get into increasing the costs of everything. We need to bring down the costs of mental health. We need to get it around, I would say, $5,000 for a clinical diagnostic assessment. I'd like to see two opinions on that, because we can do telehealth, we can do consultation. We should always have two opinions going into the court, one main opinion, one backup, three opinions if you want. But we need to get a decision into the court from the doctors that the court can rely on, so that we stop fighting. So like this case, I'm going to run back to it now. I got two custody evaluators, both opining on the family. Can we say parallel process staff splitting? That's why I'm talking about parallel process so much on my Facebook page. It happens in the family courts. The mental health people are caught in a parallel process of fighting about the patients, called staff splitting. We're in the splitting pathology of taking sides over the family. If we're part of the pathology when we get caught into taking sides. That's the stupidest thing for the doctors, the psychologists, to be doing, is taking sides. That means you're an ignorant, incompetent psychologist. We need to come together and stop and recognize the staff splitting, that we're fighting about things. So I got two psychologists, and now I'm going to come in with a third opinion. whenever multiple doctors are looking at the same information, we should come back with roughly the same diagnosis. We might have a little variation, but if we're looking at something that looks like cancer, we shouldn't have one doctor saying it's diabetes. No, everybody looks and the test results and all that stuff says cancer, not diabetes. Nothing here says diabetes. So if you've got two different doctors saying two different things, then one of them is incompetent. Okay. I don't know which one, but one of them is. One of them's right, one of them's wrong, or maybe both of them are wrong, but at least one of them's incompetent. If you got two of them disagreeing, that all doctors should come together and apply the same knowledge. Exact. I should be able to talk with whether or not there's a cross generational coalition or persecutory delusion. I should not have to educate the doctor in order to have a professional level discussion about the patient, but we do. Yikes, cowabunga. So that's, but those, as doctors, we should all be coming together, and that's important so that we give the court a clear and accurate information out of psychology about what the pathology, what the problem is in the family, so we know how to fix it. The treatment for child abuse by the targeted parent is way, way different than the treatment for child psychological abuse by the allied parent, because the treatment is initially a protective separation. So if I've got a child abuse diagnosis on the targeted parent, I want that child safe. If I've got a child cycle, I want that child safe. So which way is it going? It's got to go one way because it's going to be a diagnosis one way or the other. So, Your Honor, if you're not making a protective order for this family, somehow you're leaving the child with an abusive parent. That's just a fact. Because one parent or the other is abusing the child. The child needs protection from one parent or the other. We need a decision about which one. I'm a trauma psychologist out of foster care. I've worked with child abuse up close and personal, all four types. I've treated all four types. Holy cow, neglect out of the orphanages and foreign orphanages and stuff, or meth mom, devastating neglect is. I've worked with physical abuse. I've worked with sex abuse. I've worked with psychological abuse. It is devastating for the child. And so we need an accurate diagnosis to protect the child. 90% of families post divorce handle custody on their own just fine. We got 10% who are high conflict. Guess what? Narcissistic, borderline, dark personality parent. That's what you got. Book it all, called the dark triad and dark tetrad, the core of evil. It's in the research literature. Dark triad, dark tetrad, core of evil. It's in the family courts manipulating Your Honor, manipulating the court, manipulating us like stupid forensic psychology people, and children are getting abused as a result. This is active child abuse and active spousal abuse using the child as a weapon. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm not a forensic psychologist. I don't care about custody. In the absence of child abuse, parents have the right to parent according to their cultural values, personal values, and religious values. In the absence of child abuse, I don't get involved. Okay, I support the parent. The parent's got a right to be a parent, and kid, you kind of have to adjust to, your whatever your parents' values are, as long as there's no child abuse. That's kind of my cutoff. Is there child abuse? So if you get me involved, you're likely looking at somebody's concerned about child abuse, because that's where Dr. Childress lives. That's where I work, is in the child abuse world. And we need to protect children, all children, from all forms of child abuse 100% of the time. We don't sacrifice any child to child abuse. And so 1960s, we started to look at physical abuse. About the 80s, we started to look at sex abuse. Then we had some orphanages stuff, kind of started to look at neglect. We got neglect in the drug abusing parents. That's where we see that diagnosis. We're starting to hit the psychological child abuse diagnosis. And what that is, the psychological child abuse, is it's a ripple of the other abuses. It's the ripple of the alcoholism, neglect. It's the ripple of the physical abuse, and it's the ripple of the sex abuse. All of those create children's minds who then next generation become psychologically abusive of their children, unless we get treatment into it, unless we get something, because it's bad stuff that gets put into these kids. It damages them, and then the damage shows up second generation. What we have in the family courts, in the juvenile justice system, we have the ripple of physical child abuse. In the family courts, we've got the ripple of sex abuse. That's where does sex abuse, the ripple of sex abuse, show up in our society? Nowhere. It's a hidden pathology. That's why I say the pathogen hides. That's what it does. It hides extraordinarily well. It's a hidden pathology. These little boys never disclose. They never get treatment. Nobody ever realizes what took place because of the shame. So it's a hidden pathology. So it never gets treated. So now we wind up in the family courts around divorce, and it gets all kind of explosive with an unstable parent. Um, but it's all child abuse, and it's a ripple of child abuse. And we need to just stop fighting about it. Stop getting all caught up in the escalation and intensity of emotion. We got to bring it down, apply established knowledge from psychology, get in here and protect the kids, protect the parents from spousal abuse, make sure everybody's safe, and fix it. Fix the family. The child needs a normal range and healthy childhood. They don't need to be worried about their parents in custody and what's going on. They need to be going on sleepovers, playing soccer, and thinking about where they're going to make applications to college or what they're going to do once they graduate. They need a normal range childhood. And that's our obligation, combined obligation of the judge, who has paren patrie, he's judge, you're the parent, and the doctor, who has duty to protect obligations. So we're combined in the same goal of returning to this child a normal range childhood. So let's do that. That's a treatment plan, Your Honor. That's not a custody schedule. Custody schedule, in the absence of child abuse, each parent should have as much time and involvement as possible. Generally, that's 50-50. Sometimes every other weekend. That's kind of up to you. Clinical psychology can get healthy children and healthy families out of either one of those schedules. Every other weekend has advantages, disadvantages. Every other weeks has advantages and disadvantages, 50-50. Um, Preference, moms are important, dads are important, so I'd say 50-50. Because I can't determine which are more important to the daughter or son. Her father-daughter, that's a wonderful relationship, way different than mother-daughter, father-son, way different than mother-son. Those are all unique and all immensely valuable. So 50-50. No divorce would be my recommendation. No divorce, happy family. Oh, we got a divorce. Okay, 50-50. Something comes up. Well, they're not living the same place. Every other weekend, fine. School year, one kid, and vacation time to another kid if they're geographically separated. That's custody. The issue, Your Honor, and we know it, is the pathology, the problem, the attachment, the child saying, I don't want to be with a parent. What's going on? That's a potential child abuse. That is child abuse, one way or the other. So we got that. We got to get a proper assessment on that. So with that, I'm going to head back to my reports and hopefully convince the judge in this case that a treatment oriented approach that that recognizes the unique fragility of each parent um, uh, is a proper approach rather than sort of a custody take on the situation, and certainly not relying on parental alienation as your decision point for doing what you do. So with that, happy Sunday, everybody. Happy Memorial Day. Hopefully you're taking a 3-day vacation and getting out of town or something. So with that, have a happy Sunday. Bye bye, everybody.